What is up, adventurers, and welcome to a brand new ShawnSetGO video. Today is going to be a little bit of a tone switch for my typical World of Warcraft videos. In the most part, we make videos where we talk about a subject, we critique the parts that can be fixed, we talk about maybe solutions, and then ways to kind of curb those things. I'm going to talk about specifically the things that are done well by WoW. We're gonna talk about the things that could be, you could easily be like, this is the Blizzard issue, this is nobody else but Blizzard's fault, but we're gonna kind of spin it a little bit and make it a little bit more positive. Okay, this is a positive day, all right, positive week. Let's get it off to a good start. All right, we'll see how long this lasts. All right, so the first thing that came up, and this was a few days ago but also recently, was the issues with spam in LFG. I, like many players out there, have seeing this, and you could probably assume one of two things. I think if you're on the silver lining of positivity, you see something like this and you go, I mean, what's going on? There's no way that everyone here is legitimately selling these. They must be selling these in mass. And then you go to their gold buying websites. It's just a way to get tokens into real money. It's going to be basically all encouraging the real world selling of WoW gold into money of some sort. I want to say that I think that the avenues for something like this to not be a problem are as simple as, I think, there being a route to legitimately sell things in the game, having a sell for raids, dungeons, basically everything's regulated as far as pricing and costs and how many people are doing the run versus how many are participating in being the runnee in sort of ways. I think there's a way to kind of turn this around and make this into positive, but we're going to talk about in a moment. This one specifically says, so when is Blizzard going to do something about the advertisements in the LFG tool? Every one of the want to sells have an advert for a website to buy carries. Every time you go to report them, you get an error message saying report system unavailable. The advert will disappear, and after a few minutes, another one appears. I would say for the most part, these are like a refresh thing. It's not that it's an error, but usually for the most part, it's just removing the visual from your thing, and you have to refresh it, and that's what inevitably does it. I don't know if the process is actually causing these to be like to actually get banned and go from there, or if it's legitimately they're opening a new account. So like maybe they are doing something, but it's a different account, and maybe that's how it's done. I think with these, it must be a difficult thing to determine. Well, just because you say want to sell doesn't mean you're necessarily doing the run this way. Just because you post a link to something doesn't mean that necessarily violates the TOS, but there's got to be some sort of silver lining that is being crossed here, because a number of these are advertising to gold buying sites, which aren't allowed by the TOS. Maybe like that's how they get away with it. What's maybe just a slap on the wrist is that saying it isn't necessarily doing it. You know, like saying that you're using a site for carries and for gold, etc. I don't know if that's necessarily like enough to go off of. You maybe could qualify that in a spam regard, but how many reports, how many times does that take before that actually does make an actionable and reasonable response by the Blizzard team? I mean, it's hard to tell for sure. So let's look at some of the comments. This one says, this is something that's never going to be fixed. They're going to do something, they would have done it already. Last I checked, they can all get banned. It's against TOS. It's a lot of them are hacked to botted accounts. Let's see. Pre-made group filter. A lot of people say this using like add-ons, etc., or using in-game filters to essentially, the moment you add text, it's going to filter out some of that, because if you're not directly looking for it, then these things will exist. These things will kind of get pushed off to the side. I'm not a big fan of it personally, of being like pushing it to the side is necessarily the way. Personally, I think that you should just be allowed to post your sells, your carries, just in a different channel. I think if you can have a thing like a mature language filter and something simple as that, then you can have something like, hey, if I see WTS in there, then we can filter it out. If you're posting a link, we're filtering it out. Oh, well, they're going to add spaces in there, and so it's not going to look like a link or something like that. I think it's going to require a little bit more policing, a little bit more depth to it, to where those things can easily get reported, or like auto reported, I guess is the way. Like if you're relying on player base to do it, then I think that's going to be the issue, because a lot of people are going to be just like this. They're going to type something in, or they're going to use an add-on, and they're just going to ignore it to help, so they don't have to see it anymore, is I imagine what a lot of people are in a state of like, hey, I'm not going to be the person to stop this, so I just want to run a dungeon, so let me just do something so I don't have to see it today. Maybe that's the way. It used to be 2 clicks from a report and it would churn through so quickly. Now they've made it unnecessarily difficult. I actually don't know the reporting process beyond just like the brief description hit report. I don't know if it's changed since then, though it does seem that we've gone away from like the in-game reporting tools being as effective, and it's being more of the website tools is the way to do it. Like that filters it out. I think it's because that uses like an AI tool to kind of get you through the steps. So maybe that's the reason why the game maybe hasn't caught up with that, is the reason. But yeah, it used to be like pretty simple from what I remember. Every time you go to report them, you get an error message saying in the chat logs. I've seen that. Yeah, they never will. These accounts pay in sub for WoW tokens to pay for those runs. Blizzard makes more money from them than they do from you or me. I don't know if necessarily one person earning gold off, like paying their sub, is that way. Like how many is the payoff? I imagine there's a trade-off between amount of accounts needed to create in order to make a reasonable profit to where they're getting paid back, and then how many would Blizzard either reasonably go, all right, this is enough to where you've got 20 accounts here that are clearly this, you know, but your profit margins make us want to keep you. I mean, I think when you say it out loud, it sounds ridiculous, but I think internally in our head, we all have thought this at one point. So where we go, Blizzard's profits is the reason why we don't see these get banned more often, or we only see maybe a few really bad actors get the ban, and everyone else kind of can slide by, or maybe just a slap on the wrist, or maybe not even anything. They made it so people required a linked handheld phone in order to customize the text, and the bots got phones and made it even more advertisements in places they're not supposed to. They're learning. There's a built-in filter. Yep. If people stop buying them, and people will solve itself. I think this is another thing I see a lot, the argument of basically, if we all stop doing it, it'll no longer happen. I think this kind of appeals to the human nature that Blizzard is now acknowledging in retail, which is them going, there are simply people who do not want to do this content, but they want access to the stuff that content provides. So I think as long as there always is going to be that level, like that type of content for players, that this will always exist. I think the best thing for Blizzard to do is to kind of steer into that, or steer into the skid, and do something that makes it more regulated within the game. For example, if you're someone who's selling, who's trying to make, use gold to get WoW tokens so you can pay for your sub, and you're trying to sell, then allow that person to sell their runs at a regulated cost. Blizzard takes a cut to kind of reduce inflation, right? So like you're doing that, and essentially make it to where players can easily sell runs in a different category in the LFG tool. So not just dungeons, but like want to sell, for example. And then additionally, allow those players who are doing the runs, they can now, just like in the beginning of Liberation of Undermine, as many of you are aware, you can do crafting tables and stuff like that. You can do a lot of the kind of tune-up features. And as somebody who's running maybe lower characters, you could craft gear for people, put crafting tables out there, put a brand table out there, encourage the interaction, encourage people who are carrying to utilize their professions, as well as people who are in groups to go, hey, I have this maxed out profession. Does anybody need flasks? And then all this stuff is like regulated, or you can do you can have it count towards work orders. But my point is, it seems like it's all over the place. I promise there's a point. But the idea is that if these things are regulated in a sense that players can do these things more reasonably, you push out bots because there's too much competition. And the first thought is like, well, they'll just sell it for a cheaper price. Well, if these things are all regulated as far as costs that you can charge for these type of runs, depending on maybe how many people are doing the carry versus how many are receiving the carry, then it's like, well, they can't win on price. So now it's based off of, well, they have more offerings. Maybe they do that. Maybe they do them better. But from then on, it's just like, it's a matter of skill in the game. And so I think there's a lot of ways that you can make the game, like sellable carry is a thing. Like if we're adding single button rotation as a thing for players to simply avoid having to learn the game, then why can't we add things that go, I mean, people are going to sell to earn their own gold, as well as people are going to sell to legitimately to use gold to pay for WoW tokens. So why not add avenues into the LFG tool that allow for those things to happen? Integrate professions, allow people to, I guess, have more open and free trading between players and encourage those things. And then basically, if you want to improve the economy overall with WoW, then you have things that allow players to do these things, but maybe with that added fee. Whereas like you're doing it on the spot, so there's an added fee, but you can do it right here, right now. You don't have to wait on your public work orders or Acuity, etc. Like it's all here because you have somebody who has the materials, somebody who's willing to do it right here and right now. So it's like that to me would be a great solution to the issue. But there's more on this. As recent as a day ago, the LFG raid tool is all spam, and Blizzard has made it harder to remove them. You used to be able to right click and instantly report the advertisement, and it would be removed from your view, so you can actually look at the group without sifting through the garbage. Now you have to right click, select the drop down, click again, and then remove the group from your group finder. What was the point of making it harder for these to report these spammers? I honestly, I know it's extra steps, but honestly, more than anything, more than just the report tool, I think like I said, I think there needs to be an automod. Like to me, it's too easy to recognize when there is these players who have no intention other than to promote some sort of gold selling or promote some sort of scam of some sort. Are there some that are working? Obviously, I mean, like I don't think these things would still exist if some weren't at least doing what they're claiming that they're wanting to sell. So download pre-made group finder, set the IO filter to greater than 1. Yeah, kind of like the ignore it, but ignore it better. Is this on US or EU? US is very bad on our end. I don't ever see these on EU anymore. I see them on EU, so that's not true. Maybe not as common, but it's still there for sure. Far too many steps to report the spam. Blizzard is definitely complicit in this now. The fact that you can't report them is just unacceptable. Yeah, I think the complicit part is kind of a natural consequence of not actively dealing with the issue in a more aggressive approach. It seems like what happens is you maybe get your worst actors in this get banned, but how often or how quickly can someone spring up a new account? I would say nowadays it's ridiculously fast. So it does put Blizzard in a tough spot to where inaction becomes complicity. So is that a word, complicity? It becomes them being complicit. So I do understand that perspective for sure. This will never remove these. Download a block add-on. Why is one to seller selling not allowed? Because there's no point in filtering these words. They can simply space it out. Ban one to sell and VVTS starts becoming the norm. Wouldn't be long before bots start using words that would lead to legitimate players getting caught up to. It's a perpetual whack-a-mole. Yeah, I get this perspective, but I've never been a fan or advocate for, well, I guess they win now. I feel like that was kind of, this is the one negative thing I'll say about Blizzard. I feel like that was inevitably why the token was created. It's like, we don't have a long-term solution that we're willing to release out in phases that's going to eventually make it to where there's little to no bots existent. We're simply going to make tokens a thing to where now there's a legitimate currency to it. I know that's kind of what I'm saying in that let's put legitimate avenues, but I think my plan, while it would be something that might take a long period of time, it could also be a great route to eventually choke out and snuff out all of those spammers, because eventually the power goes through the players and the community, because it's like now you're in competition with people who can do this legitimately. Whereas the token was just like, now there's a token, so there's a thing in game. So there's, now you could say, well, it was for tokens. It wasn't for real world money. There's no real world money involved. Of course not. Or something of that regard. So let's see, because the game isn't designed for humans anymore, I'm not sure about that. I don't see anything in my group finder, but the chat is spammed to hell with bots. How are you finding these? I mean, just kind of in the LFG tool, to be honest. No one seems to understand that Blizzard doesn't remove these ads because they don't want them removed. People who buy boosts likely to pay gold from tokens, so more boosts, more money for Blizzard. Once again, I think that as much as Blizzard's profit margins comes from that in-game store and those in-game services, because they are ridiculously expensive. I will say that I don't know if I side with this idea entirely, because when you say it out loud, it just kind of sounds ridiculous. Like, yeah, Blizzard, they want all the bots to stay alive because the bots are funding the game. I don't think it happens nearly enough to where like this is lining their pockets because of this. I don't see that being the case. I think this is more of a consequence of when things get uber challenging, uber difficult, when the monotony or doing things over and over again gets to be worse than just playing the game and like people enjoying the game. This is where it's like people decide to pay. It's more of players don't have the time. That's maybe a reason, but I think really what it is if you have players who want to play the game, you're not going to have bots. If you have players who want to maintain that they're upkeeping with all the dailies, weeklies, etc., and making sure they keep up their vault and they do all this content that they don't want to keep up and doing, and they're bored by certain content, this is where bots come into play to me. It's not simply just a like money transaction and no thought behind it. It's usually like if a player wants to play, they'll have no desire to do a bot because they enjoy the game. But if a player wants to maintain the illusion that they play, that's where this comes up, in my opinion. So let me know in the comments. I would like to hear, I guess, what people's thoughts on are, like, what do you think is the solution here? Like the long-term solution for this? What do you think is Blizzard missing? Is it just that we just need to ignore it until it goes away? I don't see that working, because I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people ignore it, but I mean, it still exists. I think that the best way to do it is to, of course, make it not necessarily non-profitable, but that there's too much competition to make a profit off of if you're trying to say undercut other players, or it's too regulated to find like your profit margin or your niche to make sales in a illegitimate way like this. So let me know in the comments, of course, what you think. Of course, if you like this video, give it a like. I appreciate all the support, you guys. It's been amazing making videos for you guys, and as well as making content in this game. I want to stress that as much as we critique the game, as much as there are things that we may not like, I still am very passionate about this game over 10 years later, and I want to see its success not only into the next season, but into the next expansion and further into the amazing Blizzard content that we're going to be seeing hopefully soon. So, of course, like the video if you liked it, subscribe to the video while you're at it, subscribe to the page while you're at it. Of course, check us out live. We do stream at twitch.tv/ShawnSetGO, as well as our TikTok. Same thing, ShawnSetGO, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. You can catch us there. We often are playing not just WoW, but also indies and things like that, as well as our podcast on Patreon, Hearths and Crafts. You can subscribe for free and check out some of the content there by becoming a member and seeing some of that behind the scenes content, as well as extended cut, final cut content as well. But this video's gone a little bit long. Apologies, but catch you in the next one. Peace.